Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Robin Longe. I'm a partner here at Dentons from our Vancouver office. I also act as co-chair of our national mining group. I work as a corporate lawyer. My practice is primarily focused in the mining sector, in mergers and acquisitions, and also providing advice to clients on environmental and regulatory issues. I'll be your moderator for today's session. I think our discussion will be really informative. Our speakers will be reviewing the key considerations for investing in the North American EV battery space, including a comparative analysis of opportunities in Canada and the US. Before we begin, I'd like to say a few words about our team. Dentons is a unique law firm. We offer clients a broad network of resources across the globe, and we're able to align our expertise wherever our business takes you. One of our resources is our partnership with Dentons Global Advisors. So DGA provides advisory services and helps clients engage with governments and regulatory bodies, navigate public disclosures and transactions, and also manage reputations through critical moments of challenge or opportunity. Our first speaker, Elizabeth Tate, is an associate partner of DGA and based in Washington, D.C. Elizabeth brings over 15 years of expertise in government affairs, sustainability, business strategy, and political risk management. She holds a law degree from the University of Pennsylvania and a certificate of business and public policy from the Wharton School of Business. She has held executive positions in a major industrial corporation and has also advised startups on sustainability strategies for alignment with emerging ESG and clean energy regulations. In her prior role in the battery technology sector, Elizabeth has led a significant public-private partnership and advanced policies on the circular economy and critical minerals supply chain. We're also fortunate to have Ali Amadee here today, who's a partner at Dentons based out of our Montreal office. Ali heads our Canadian National Practice Group focused on lithium-ion batteries and battery storage, and is particularly active in the field of energy transition. Ali's practice supports our Dentons colleagues in our other offices around the globe on complex cross-border and regulatory matters. Ali has lived on 3 continents, is fluent in several languages, and routinely advises business leaders on legal and geopolitical matters relating to China, the Middle East, and other economies. And with that, I'll hand it over to Elizabeth to start the first session.
Hello. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and for Dentons for having me here today. As mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Tate, an associate partner with Albright Stonebridge Group, a division of Dentons Global Advisors. We are affiliated with Dentons, but a different firm, just to clarify. If you could go to the next slide. Albright Stonebridge Group is a leading geopolitical strategy and advisory firm, originally founded by Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and we offer a full range of services, including policy analysis, business and government strategy, and communications to manage complex issues. Our teams comprise both sector experts in fields such as energy, healthcare, technology, and sustainability, as well as country and regional experts with deep understanding of the interplay between local and global dynamics. Our firm is anchored in Washington, D.C., but has offices around the world with global reach and robust experience. You can go to the next slide. So we are here today to talk about investing in the North American battery space. In case you haven't heard, the U.S. is in the middle of a battery boom. In 2019, just 2 battery factories were operating in the U.S., with another 2 under construction. Today, there are about 30 battery factories either planned, under construction, or operational in the country. More than $110 billion of investment have been announced in the battery space in the U.S. in the last 2 years. We've seen announcements from Ford, Stellantis, Gotion, Blue Oval, LG, Toyota, Freyr. The list goes on and on. I've listed only a few examples here. We are talking billions of dollars and potentially millions of jobs. Critically, this investment spans the value chain, including investment in critical minerals, mining and processing, component manufacturing, cell manufacturing, battery production, and recycling. This surge has had a massive impact, with U.S. capacity estimated to surpass 900 gigawatt hours by 2030. And if all the plants get built, that would be enough battery capacity for more than 13 million EVs per year. Although, of course, not all of that capacity will be used for EVs, and some will go into battery storage systems and other uses. If you could go to the next slide. So what is driving this boom? One is demand. This has been a dramatic few years in the energy industry overall, and in the EV industry in particular. As most listening today are aware, the last 24 months have been transformative in terms of global EV adoption. While the seeds of that EV transformation were planted many years ago with industrial policies in China resulting in scale and cost reductions across the EV supply chain, and with policies such as tailpipe emission standards and zero vehicle sales mandates in the US and Europe, it was in 2022 we saw an astonishing leap in EV sales globally, with sales growing 90% in the US and EU. If you could go to the next slide. Another driver of the investment in the US battery space is concern about energy and supply chain security. China has emerged over the last decade as the dominant player in the supply chain for the minerals and products necessary to make EV batteries. And while other countries host significant upstream activities, China dominates midstream refining and downstream manufacturing across nearly all battery materials. Recent geopolitical events have caused the US and Europe to be concerned about China's dominance in this space. The pandemic illustrated the global economy's vulnerability to supply chain constrictions, and the Ukraine-Russia conflict has placed increasing stress on global energy markets. These have contributed to widespread inflation and food scarcity and have led governments, including the US, to reevaluate their dependencies in order to protect their economic interests and strengthen supply chain reliability and security. Leaders in the US now view global clean energy supply chain dependence on China as similar to the West's dependence on Russian hydrocarbons before the invasion of Ukraine. And as a result, the US, through policy measures, has focused on how to source energy supply and manufacture intermediate and final products, either domestically or in cooperation with trusted partners. If you go to the next slide. The US has moved forward major new industrial policy aimed at accelerating the energy transition and reshoring and friendshoring supply chains. 3 major pieces of legislation, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, will together provide over $2 trillion in funding for a vast array of energy projects over the next 10 years. Together, these allocate hundreds of billions of dollars for government investment in clean energy and advanced technology and manufacturing, including into the battery industry. In addition, President Biden has invoked the Defense Production Act to spur innovation and supply for the 5 main battery minerals, as well as domestic supply chain and production for certain renewable energy technologies. You can go to the next slide. And 1 year later, it's working. While some of the planned US battery-related investments were already in the works before the IRA accelerated the scale and pace of many of these investments and sparked incredible global interest in the US battery economy. In the EV battery industry alone, we have seen nearly 80 million in new investments and over 75 projects announced, with more anticipated this year and the next. And I meant 80 billion, sorry, with a B. If you can go to the next slide. So what do you need to know about the IRA and US funding incentives? I'm not going to give a detailed explanation of the IRA today. There are other webinars for that, including an excellent one put on by the Dentons team. But I did want to call out some dominant themes and some specific incentives of interest to those in the battery space. The big things you need to know are that there are both supply and demand incentives, that these incentives can stack together, that there are bonus credits that layer on the base credits, and that there are restrictions and requirements to eligibility for these incentives. And lastly, that there are additional considerations at the state and local levels. On the supply incentives, much attention has been paid to the 30D tax credit for purchasing EVs. The key things for this audience to know is that half of the amount of that credit is tied to where the vehicle's battery components were manufactured, requiring that it be the United States or in a country with a free trade agreement with the United States, like Canada. And the other half of the credit requires that a certain percentage of the value of the critical minerals in the battery were extracted or processed from qualifying countries. For both parts of the credit, the required percentages will steadily increase over the next decade. But after 2023, battery components sourced from China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea could disqualify a vehicle from receiving the tax credit. And for those today, this has implications for supply chains and whether a company is trying to sell to an automaker that is trying to qualify a vehicle for the credit. More important than the EV credit, however, are the manufacturing incentives, which allow credit for the cost of extracting and processing critical battery materials and minerals. These credits can apply at each major stage of the production process and can be combined. Lastly, there are also loan guarantees and grant programs, with the highest loan guarantee reaching $90 million. And just this month, DOE opened a new tranche of grant funding for battery minerals and components. These grants can be significant, reaching into the $100 million and more range. Can you go to the next slide? The other thing you need to know is that the credits can stack. You are not limited to one. And in fact, the challenge for companies is to figure out all the puzzle pieces a project may be eligible for and to create the biggest puzzle. There is no one size fits all or one size fits all companies. Some credits cannot be combined with others, some can. So a company could conceivably secure incentive for renewable energy investments, EV battery supply chain manufacturing, and get additional credit for labor practices and locational decisions. If you can go to the next slide. And this brings me to what else you need to know. There are bonus credits that add on to the base amount. There are tax monetization provisions, which give options to pre-revenue companies or entities without tax liability. And lastly, an overlay on all of this is state and local considerations. Because in addition to the federal incentives, states have given out billions in tax breaks and local investment incentives to battery companies. There are also other specific considerations at a state level, and companies should think about investigating multiple states and locales for investment. This is something we are helping clients with. You go to the next slide. Another key consideration I wanted to flag is sourcing and partnerships in the value chain. As mentioned, China is dominant in this space and it's difficult currently to source battery materials or components without China present somewhere in your value chain. However, anti-China sentiment in the US is currently at an all-time high. And with several plant announcements such as Ford CATL, but also Gotion and Microvast, facing challenges, scrutiny, and rejection by states for involvement with China-based partners. We have observed from our clients that these very public challenges that the structuring of these battery projects is very important in terms of partners and licensing arrangements, and is crucial for companies to assess the risk of all of their battery investments. Go to the next slide. I've covered a lot and look forward to more discussion, but to sum up very briefly, companies considering the US battery space should be thinking about the regulatory environment, which is complex and varies state by state and even by locality. Upcoming US elections could also further complicate these dynamics. The location, companies should consider evaluating multiple locations for incentives and logistics. This often requires engagement with local stakeholders. Additionally, certain federal incentives have credits that are tied to the qualities of a given location. Partners can be a critical element of success for US projects, and companies should seriously evaluate China ties in their partnerships and value chains. And lastly, companies should consider the availability and quality of skilled workers, assessing local training programs and educational institutions. We are helping our clients tackle these and other considerations as they look at the US space to understand the risk and opportunity landscape and to navigate the variety of potential incentives. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Ali, to talk about the Canadian opportunities in this space.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Elizabeth, for the great presentation. I will speak about the Canadian EV battery industry and where we are at today. Next slide, please. So I'm a partner at Dentons. I'm also the head of the Battery and Energy Storage Group nationally in Canada for Dentons. As you know, Dentons is a law firm. We're the largest law firm in the world with offices, as you see on the map, across the globe. No law firm has the coverage we have in terms of presence and expertise on the ground in many of the jurisdictions, many of which are relevant to the battery supply chain that we are talking about today. We work with our teams across the world in this battery supply chain space and all the interesting projects that are going up in various countries, including in Europe and in North America, of course. Next slide, please. So in Canada, we have a dedicated team to the battery and EV space, led by myself. It's a team of more than 20 professionals from ocean to ocean, basically across the country. We have actual experience having worked on various types of projects, including a gigafactory project that was in the works. And as well as other types of industrial projects, and we have helped, experience in negotiating with local and provincial and federal governments across the country on these types of projects. As you know, Canada is a federal state, so you have basically, just like the United States, you have a federal government with its own spheres of regulatory power, and also you have the provinces, which actually one could argue that the provinces in Canada have more regulatory spheres of influence than some of the states that the states have in the United States. So, for example, you have specific ministries and that are dedicated, for example, to environmental matters, let's say the whole battery supply chain is really done federally and provincially, and regulated provincially and federally. So we offer strategic advice and help on all of those aspects as they relate to our clients' projects. Next slide, please. So obviously we talked about this. We help our clients in all aspects of a project, including community relations, First Nation matters, establishment of factories, project finance, corporate securities, government affairs, litigation, employment, workforce mobility. So if you have a project here, we can basically help you from the start to the implementation and beyond. So that's the role that we play, and we work together with DGA across the world also to help our clients meet their project goals. Next slide, please. So let's talk about Canada. I'm sure you've heard in the news, or obviously if you are in Canada, you've heard that Canada's been working very hard to build its a strong EV battery supply chain. Of course, this is a nation. This is a new, let's say, we could say that it's a developing industry for us. The whole battery supply chain. Our peers in Asia are way ahead of us in that sector. So it's important that government, just like in the United States, that government assists the creation of this supply chain and this sector. So a lot of the projects, as you know, are greenfield projects. So they definitely are very risky projects, and definitely government needs to come in and give certain assurances and funding and assistance. So that has been done really in parallel by the provincial governments, including Quebec and Ontario, and by the federal government. They've worked really to put together this ambitious project and implement it. Project being to have a really strong, leading battery supply chain in Canada, which would feed basically all of North America, because it's hard to financially justify big projects of this nature, like a gigafactory, if you're looking only at the Canadian market. You should be looking beyond. You should be looking at the North American market and the opportunities. And when the business case is made, it has to be relying on that, on the entirety of North America. That's for the bigger projects. Obviously, if you're looking at other parts of the supply chain or specific clients or specific sectors, it is possible to go smaller. But often when we see clients coming here, they're looking at establishing here, but looking at the US, looking at the rest of Canada and beyond, and looking to how they can use the legal advantages of the different free trade agreements that are in place in Canada. So what are Canada's advantages in building the supply chain? So Canada is obviously already very strong in mining and mineral processing. And my colleague Robin is an expert on the matter, and he'll tell you that, before this whole battery supply chain was what it is today, Canada has always been a leader in mining, and we have not only are we a leader in the science and in the process and all that stuff, but we also have the resources, right? So we're the only country, and that's very unique to us, and in the Western Hemisphere, we have all the critical minerals required to manufacture batteries: graphite, nickel, aluminum, and so on. So we work with our partners in help in basically trying to develop these minerals further, and so that they can use it in their part of the supply chain that they are building, including countries like Japan, like obviously the United States, our partner, and Korea, South Korea. So Canada also ranks #1 in North America and 4th in the world for raw material capacities in the battery supply chain. So that's definitely an important statistic. So by nature, Canada has that know-how and the actual resources, which helped it be so ambitious in wanting to bring all these projects to North America and in Canada. Manufacturing expertise. Obviously, we as a G7 country, we have the lowest manufacturing cost, which is great. We don't have the lowest manufacturing cost in the world. That's definitely not the case. But in the G7 and with the country with our capabilities, we definitely have very good. In terms of cost, we are very efficient. And we're ranked second best battery supply chain by Bloomberg, the annual global lithium-ion battery supply chain ranking. Canada was ranked as a good supply chain. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. Let's not kid ourselves, but definitely the existing manufacturing expertise that exists here can definitely help build this supply chain and manufacturing capacities that we are so ambitiously targeting to build. Canada very strong in R&D and talent. We have good universities. When you compare it to our population, there's a lot of learning centers here. We have good schools. We have good universities. We have free education. So definitely there's a lot of possibility to have access to talent and R&D, and there's a great R&D base that exists here already as a country, whether it's in aerospace, whether it's in other types of whether it's in mining, tech. We have a big presence already, and obviously that helps staff these big projects that are coming to Canada. Clean energy is definitely one of the major advantages that we have, and we should not take that for granted. Quebec, for example, where I am from, has a huge hydroelectric potential and capacity, and it is, trust me, what we hear from our clients, a lot of them who chose us, Quebec, as a place to have their establishment is definitely the cost of energy, right? First of all, is lower, and the cost of clean energy, right? Because often, with companies in this space, how clean your supply chain and your source of energy is very important to the ESG requirements, and the intent to produce a battery that is as green as possible to companies like Northvolt and others is super important, and that's part of their raison d'être, let's say in French. So definitely clean energy in Quebec has been, and if you read, for example, the statements that were made by companies like the Northvolt, which recently chose to Quebec as its next gigafactory site, well, definitely the clean energy and the cost of energy was definitely an important motivation for them. There's a strong existing automobile industry in Canada, and they are right here in big. Obviously, a huge part of it is in Ontario, very close to Detroit. So we're looking at Windsor, we're looking at all that area. Quebec is not far from there. There's existing EV in general, and EV for me includes eVTOL and other, types of EV than just road vehicles. So there's a very strong presence of the automobile industry, North American class automobile industry here in Canada. So that definitely is important because a lot of these battery manufacturers, they have to be close to their potential clients, their potential customers, and also to their supply chain. So obviously the fact that they are here and the fact that they're close to their supply chain is an important factor in order to have the cleanest battery with the least transportation between the sources and the supply chain players as possible. So government and popular support is definitely something that is a plus in Canada. You gotta definitely, I know there's some attendees from the government side. You have to really give it to them. They have done a great job provincially and federally in bringing and convincing players to come to North America and to come to Canada and different provinces with these big projects. So that's definitely something that has also gained traction with the popular support. There's an ESG culture that goes beyond just a few provinces. It is present in Canada. Federal, provincial, municipal governments have been very supportive. So that these are all elements that have motivated big companies in the space to come here. I guess I'll make it quick for the rest. Next slide, please. Incentives, I'll go very quickly. So maybe next slide. Obviously, there are federal incentives, including the favorable tax measures that exist, like the investment tax credit, ICT, for clean energy manufacturing is definitely a pot where we work with our clients to go and to see if they qualify. We work with them and with our other advisors to help build a package that works the best. Obviously, there are the accounting firms involved in the team of advisors and other specialists. So definitely the favorable tax measures, the investment tax credits are important, and there are different types of them. I'm not going to go into detail of them, but it's definitely a good source of benefits and incentives. The Strategic Innovation Fund is definitely the main vehicle and pool from which the federal government has basically used money to invest in these huge projects that we'll talk about. Some examples of them, but definitely the Strategic Innovation Fund is a federal fund for these types of greenfield battery supply chain projects that obviously have an element of innovation in them. We have expertise also to assist clients in accessing and talking to government and negotiating if something is favorable. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is also another important player, and the goal is to make it's a very recent. Recent it's a relative word, but it's a fairly recent institution that's federal, and they have been recently mandated as to be the primary source of financing for clean electricity generation, transmission, energy storage, BESS projects. So there is some funds in there as well. Any EV charging stations also, for example, a company we know, Flow in Quebec, has gotten a interesting package from them recently to develop a charging station network. Next slide, we'll talk about the provincial incentives. And so the Quebec and Ontario governments, for example, and that's just an example, there are other provinces as well, but just to give an example, Quebec and Ontario have been very proactive in both assisting companies, and I mean, the companies around the table today do know that, the investment, FDI and investment development organizations like Invest Quebec and the equivalent in Ontario and others are very, very proactive in helping you, and we can help assist, put you in contact and work with you and them together. But not only in providing significant funding to these projects, but also to help you find a site, to help you secure the relationships with local partners. So these are very important players that will help you in the process, and will be there obviously in the background to help you with implementing these legally and on the ground. So the local battery R&D system is also in development nationwide. So the Quebec Energy Transition Valley is an example. So there's this kind of Silicon Valley that's been created in Quebec that's been developed around Bécancour, Trois-Rivières, Shawinigan, and that's an innovation zone in Ontario and other parts. There's also, especially around the EV space, there's also this kind of presence as well. And, you know, when we speak about the EV and the battery space supply chain, we're not only talking about EVs, we're not talking about batteries only, we're talking about all the components, we're talking about from the mine all the way to the vehicle itself. So in that sense, the government is supportive of all the various elements of the supply chain. So they would be ready to help including with funding across the supply chain. So maybe the next slide, we'll just quickly look at the examples of government very quickly. Obviously, you've heard about Northvolt. Quebec and Ottawa will invest around $2.7 billion in the construction of a Northvolt plant. That's in addition to the what they call the IRA matching package, which is in production incentives, right, to match those measures. Volkswagen, has a huge project also coming. General Motors, POSCO with Ultium CAM, that's in the CAM sector. Lion Electric's battery plant recently got recently I'm talking about 2 years ago, received the backing also of the government in terms of its battery pack assembly plant in Quebec. Again, from both layers of government, Fed and Quebec are providing $100 million in forgivable loans, which are subject to different conditions, including milestones, including creation of jobs and others. These are very interesting types of funding you can get for these projects. Maybe the next slide, quickly, we'll just cover the few observations that we had with respect to the battery supply chain. Next slide, please. So obviously, the timing is great in many ways. Opportunities are there and significant support from government and local communities as they are building and committing funds to the supply chain. These obviously pools are not unlimited. So obviously, if you have a project, it's good to go as soon as possible to the various authorities. And I always say it's not we're building a North American supply chain. So I tell clients, look at the US, look at Canada, look at different provinces, look at different states in the US, and look at it as a bigger picture, right? So what is good for your supply chain? And we'll talk about this with Elizabeth later on, but have a North American plan, and the governments are very supportive. So let's take advantage of that. There's a return of great manufacturing jobs as a result of all this for both US and Canada. So there's a big positive reaction from many communities. Obviously, there will always be people who are against certain projects, including the environmental impacts and other factors, but that's normal, and it's important to mitigate those risks. But there is still in Canada, at least, I know that there is a positive reaction from most communities. The types of investment we currently see, there's greenfield projects, as I said, lots of FDI, including projects like Northvolt, as you know, Ford, EcoPro, Ford GM, POSCO GM, LG, all of these companies are now working on projects in Canada. These are the bigger projects, but there's also smaller projects, JVs. When you see, for example, industrial projects where you see a foreign battery expert, that's a lot of what we see these days. Foreign battery experts in from Asia or elsewhere who already have the expertise and they want to bring it here. So they want to partner up with local market players who have a presence already. The R&D ecosystem and the tech startups around this ecosystem, it's very important. M&A and takeovers, we haven't seen a lot yet, but it's possible because a lot of companies are having financial difficulties. As you know, the market around the whole green economy and battery space between 2020 and 2022 went a bit crazy, and there's a market correction in place right now, so there could be opportunities for companies. So nowadays it's important for a company in the States to have a strong business case. Ideally, have an offtake already lined up, offtakes and the likes. Environmental permitting are issues that are important here in Canada, and acceptability. So this is something we can help you with. Put together. First of all, figure out what the issues are and how to address them, and then how to implement. So those are pretty much my observations. So Robin, back to you for questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ali and Elizabeth, for your great presentations. We can now move on to the Q&A portion of the session. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to answer throughout the session. For the first question, and here's one for both of you. What do you see as the greatest opportunity for companies investing in this space?
I think the opportunity is to be creative, both in terms of location, but also in how you're configuring the project. There's so many incentives available, and so many different types of incentives that are available, that I think it's really on companies to think through how different components of a project or a plant or an initiative could be eligible for different incentives, and to also think about this as not just a US or a Canada investment, to start thinking about what are the opportunities within the region.
Definitely, I think on same comment. It's to think the opportunity is that it's not just a Canada or US market. It's a North American and beyond market. So obviously there's a lot of government support also. That's a big opportunity right now. I think the timing is great to develop a project that thinks big and thinks long term, because between now and in the next 7 to 10 years, there's going to be a lot of need for batteries, and that's an opportunity to basically already start planning and start building, so that when the demand goes up in terms of batteries, you're there to meet them, and you're there to you're not late to the game. So I think that's the opportunity.
Yes. So do you see an advantage for companies investing in both the US and Canada? And you talked about North America as a whole. And so is there an advantage of investing or engaging in a whole of North America approach?
We've absolutely seen companies that are looking at the whole of North America, looking at investments in Mexico and Canada, in the United States. I think it is telling of how tailored a solution needs to be to a given company and a given company's products, that we've seen companies, from the same region, such as Fryer and Northville, choose different locations for their first North American operations. And I really think that speaks to the need for companies to carefully consider what's available in a given location, in a given country, in a given state, in a given locality, and also to be engaging in productive conversations with policymakers and other government officials in those national and subnational arenas.
Yeah, and totally, that also applies to the projects here. And what I can say also is, basically, I think there are few clients I've seen, or maybe none, who did not have all of either all of North America in mind, as either for the presence or for the market. They usually are in developing a strategy as to, okay, if I want to come to North America, where do I start? That's one thing. Where do I establish myself with the hope of expanding? Or if I want to basically, let's say if I'm a battery manufacturer and I want my gigafactory in one place, and then part of the assembly maybe somewhere closer to the OEMs. I've seen that as well. Or part of the R&D could be elsewhere as well. Let's say if parts of Canada are there are good universities and good support to have your R&D kind of space and center around that region, that you see that a lot of that as well. And obviously mining is a big part of this. So you see kind of like a movement towards bigger players in the space, in the auto and battery industry, wanting to have control over the mining aspect of it, and wanting to purchase actual facilities. So it could be elements that are in different parts of North America for a given company.
And just to go off of what Ali was saying, I think companies are really taking a multiple level of the supply chain look at
Yeah.
these decisions and thinking through where minerals being sourced, where those minerals being processed, where components being manufactured. And that, as Ali said, may take place in several locations across North America or other countries. But increasingly, I think we're seeing companies think beyond just what they make and think about where they play in this larger value chain.
Right, and Elizabeth, you had referenced policy, and so what are some of the challenges that you see with current U.S. and Canadian policy? And as a follow-up, what needs attention from policymakers in your mind?
On the US side, I think there's a tension between wanting to move fast, accelerate this space, accelerate the energy transition, and also the focus on protectionism within the US policy, particularly the anti-China sentiment within US policy. And I think this does create a real tension. We are waiting currently on IRS guidance that will further clarify the ability of battery components, but also ultimately vehicles, to be eligible for the purchasing tax credit. And increasingly, there is scrutiny over, as I mentioned, over projects and partnerships that have China-based companies within their supply chain. And that creates a real tension, right? Because if we want to move fast, we need to use existing technology and scale. And this leads us to, I think, really needing a North American effort, right? As we're looking to our partners in Canada and their access to minerals, our partners elsewhere. But I think this is that central tension. Also within the United States, it is hard currently to move projects forward quickly, right? There's an abundance of news articles about permitting reform. I won't go into it today, but challenges such as permitting that delay projects or slow down projects or increase the cost of projects, I think are also creating a tension within U.S. policy priorities.
Yeah, and totally. I mean, permitting is definitely one item that definitely is always something I speak to people about. We are in Canada, especially depending on places, very sensitive to environmental impacts of projects and community impacts. And it's the same in the US, but in Canada, I would say even maybe sometimes more prevalent as an issue. So very important to engage us on these aspects, and it's something that we work often with as much the engineers and the consultants who are on the technical side, but also on us on how we present the projects to the authorities and to ensure that we address their concerns and we address the community's also concerns. So definitely that's something important because clients want these projects to go quickly. And for example, if there's a environmental impact evaluation or something like that, depending on the project, obviously, well, that could really slow down the pace of their projects. So when they're doing this kind of shopping around, forum shopping of where they want to have their project, the pace at which permitting can be unlocked is important. The governments are, though, as far as Canada is concerned, they've been very sensitive to this issue. They know the importance that the business case to work, the batteries or whatever components or the project or the supply chain player needs to be ready with their project ready to deliver by a certain date, let's say 2026, because they would be the ones who would provide, let's say, the CAM to the gigafactory that's next door. So it's important that the timing is important. So that's something we tend to really work closely on with our clients, and it's something Elizabeth and I could look at with you guys to see how we can manage these challenges and how it can be addressed, and what are maybe the jurisdictions where certain things could be a concern, and what are the jurisdictions where it would not, right? The other issue, and I would be naive not to mention it, is the energy issue. For example, in Quebec right now, as you know, Quebec has strong abundance of hydroelectric power, we're always in surplus. So we're always, we've sold and committed to sell a lot of our energy already to the state of New York and others. And there was a time, as I said, there were, like, this is not long ago, where we're really in surplus and we're selling these this electricity. But now with all these projects that are coming here, and they're very high energy consuming projects, and there's a big demand. And so right now, to manage another 1 or 2 gigafactories in Quebec in terms of energy, and committing by Hydro-Quebec and the government to have enough for all of these projects, it's a challenge now for the first time since I remember, at least. So it's definitely something that we're working on. Obviously, the government's also developing the energy output, but it's something that we need to address with the government, because, for example, for major projects right now in Quebec, you need to quickly engage with the government and get an approval for, if it's, like, for example, a gigafactory, as to where you can go with your project to get whether, first of all, they'll be able to commit to deliver it to you in time, but also where in Quebec to go to ensure that you will have that type of energy from the grid. So that's another policy issue that the government is working on strongly. First, to build more capacity, but also to be able to manage and provide energy to all of these great projects.
Hey, we have a question from the audience that is connected to policy, and it's how will the change to a Republican or conservative government in the US or Canada affect outlook for the industry?
I think this is the question that's the top of everyone's mind these days as we head into a pretty significant election year. Notably, it's an election year in many countries around the world, and so the next year could have significant political implications, I think, for this entire value chain, depending on the way things go. In the United States, a notable thing about the IRA is that 80% of the funding has gone to Republican-led states, in the creation of a new battery belt right in the south of the US. It will be interesting to see how those economic benefits affect the election next year. We expect that there will be, some continued, I think, more political efforts in curbing certain of the IRA programs and incentives. Certainly anything that's passed on a partisan basis, unfortunately, always suffers some whiplash effects. That said, there are a lot of Republicans, and particularly at the state level and the local level, you see Republican governors who have embraced these incentives and have pushed to attract companies to their states that are in this EV battery space. So we are optimistic, and I chat with some of our more Republican-minded experts pretty frequently, and we're optimistic that a lot of these programs will last because of the significant benefits that are flowing to communities.
No, I share the same optimism, and of course, I think when you look at the political landscape in Canada, and then of course there are areas where there's a lot more hostility to these types of projects, but overall there's a lot of buy-in, and then by nature I think Canada is I would say more energy minded, and green energy and green economy, let's say more friendly to that, the public opinion in general, and obviously the governments and the politicians kind of follow, right? So I think that there will be a continuity. That being said, you can't really know, first of all, what the next government will look like, what party will be leading it. That definitely no one can say for sure. Second of all, even if there is a conservative government, I would think that there will be still, support overall for this. Maybe I think that there may be a little more caution on how to spend public funds in terms of green energy projects, and there's just caution in spending, and I think even the current government is more and more cautious in terms of because I mean, obviously we're in a period, an economic period that's a bit uncertain. So obviously the government is more cautious in spending. But overall, I think given the impacts that these projects could have for a lot of areas in Canada, there is room to see positive and continuous support.
Right, and political considerations may be one element, but are there examples of clients comparing the U.S. and Canada for investment potential, and then how are they currently making their decisions?
I mean, I think we absolutely see companies that are looking across US, Canada, and Mexico, candidly, as they look at investment decisions. I think this gets back to the what are you trying to make? Who are you trying to make it with? Where are your customers? What are the key priorities in making the economics of a project work, right? Access to renewable energy or access to other raw materials, supply chains, proximity to customers, proximity to workforce or universities, as Ali has talked about. In the United States, the characteristics of a given location vary so much state to state, and the incentives that different states are offering vary state to state, and it's often very bespoke to what a company is trying to achieve, and that really requires that policy maker dialogue. But I think this is a top of mind consideration for companies that are out of North America looking into North America. Where are the opportunities across the region, and are there opportunities in different parts of the supply chain in different, whether that's Mexico, US, or Canada as well?
I would say, I mean, exactly the same considerations that I see on this side of the border, because, and again, I would say when you're looking at inbound investment, I'm rarely seen a potential or actual client that at the same time as looking at Canada is not looking also at other options, or whether it's the same project, where should I go, or the same project, what North American view should I have? Should I have elements here and elements across the border? But let's not kid ourselves. The funding and financing, especially because these are important and risky and greenfield projects, a lot of these are definitely if the money is there and they can get a bit more funding and or significant more funding from a specific jurisdiction, it definitely helps. It's not the main issue, or it's not the only factor, but definitely it's a factor. But again, at the end of the day, I think, like for example, when you look at from what I read in the news about the Northvolt project, I mean, Northvolt, they were looking at Canada, and ultimately in terms of what they, and this is public information, they got some sort of a matching package for the IRA equivalent. So I mean, if the jurisdiction really wants the project, I think they will try to make it happen. In this case, I think a lot of, there was also like the culture and the type of green energy hydroelectric power source. It was very typical and present in Quebec. So, I mean, these are all the check marks that for a company are important. But ultimately, I think it's a project specific, company specific, and also sometimes there is a bit of political in there. If two governments are working well together and they want to show that, like, if this guy, we've collaborated on this, bringing this project from a certain Asian country to here, it shows our commitment, and the political players behind all this have lobbied and pushed hard for it. Sometimes that's what unlocks it. Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a mix of all these factors.
And as a follow-up, and obviously DGA and Dentons play slightly different roles, but can you give examples of how you're supporting clients as they make decisions on where to invest, and how are you supporting them as they pursue their investments?
We're supporting them in a variety of different ways. We are helping clients evaluate different locations and make connections with local stakeholders and state level stakeholders. We are helping clients go directly after funding incentives, such as grants and tax incentives. We are also helping clients at a more macro level, conducting risk and opportunity assessments and helping to evaluate the political landscape as well as the whole supply chain. So we have a variety of different types of experts on our team. And what has been really astonishing about this year is the variety of different work, all geared towards helping companies to first understand what the opportunities are, also to understand what the risks are and how to manage those risks, and then to go after those opportunities.
No, I mean, it's very, all of these definitely we do together with DGA for clients. Another thing, especially as a law firm, obviously we also help them negotiate contracts with the stakeholders, their partners here, the JVs, if it's JVs, well, to structure their presence and their projects from a tax and the corporate and legal standpoint, to finance the project finance aspect of it, the financing, whether it's equity or other, or typical bank or government. So all of that, usually it's all of that together, or parts of that, elements of that together. So definitely we help them with that, with the environmental issues, the permitting, even things as simple as, a lot of these big projects, they have also their executives who have to come here, their people. There's an immigration law aspect of helping get specific visas and exemptions for them to be able to come and stay until they're able to lead and develop the project. So, I mean, depends also on the client. Some clients, they have less of a presence in North America. Say they need a lot more, they want a lot more hand-holding, and they want us to really be their kind of project managers here, and DGA and Dentons, we do that for them, right? And we kind of, sometimes subcontract some elements that we need to do, but most of the stuff we can do together. But some other players, they already have a big presence. They already know where they're going. They already know what they're doing. So we just help them, for example, with acquiring the land, negotiating agreements, project finance, due diligence, and the like. So that's really, and it goes from, like, as I said, helping them with unlocking the funds, negotiating with the governments, all the way to establishment of their plant, hiring people, employment agreements, employment issues, project finance, and so on and so forth. So it's a very broad, let's say, involvement.
Well, thanks so much, Ali. Many thanks to both you and to Elizabeth, and to all of you who attended today. We hope you found the session valuable. The presentation will be distributed with relevant materials in our post-event email. So thanks again for attending, and have a great rest of the day.